Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to another Reltio community show. My name is Chris Detzel, and I am the Director of Customer Community and Engagement. Sometimes I have to think about that title because it's really long. Today's session will be on blazing trails in master data, stories from women succeeding in MDM. And today we have 4 special guests, which I thought was so exciting. And we actually scheduled this a couple of months ago. Megan Gilhooly, so sorry, Megan. I don't say your last name a lot, but she's a Senior Director of Self-Help and Content Strategy. Deanne Branham, she's a VP of Professional Services here at Reltio. Michelle Popovits, is that right, Michelle? You had to...
Yep.
Oh, great. Technical Data Consultant, and Ashley Branham, Senior Data Configuration Specialist. So we're really excited about this. This is going to be a conversation, so no presentation, I don't believe. So just the rules of the show real quick. Just keep yourself on mute. All questions will be asked in chat, or you can take yourself off mute to ask any questions. And Megan is actually taking the questions today. I will not be doing that. The community show will be recorded and posted to the Reltio community. The goal is to have that done by either tomorrow or Monday. And we do have some really great shows coming up. Today's show on blazing trails and MDM, stories from women succeeding in master data management. We are still having our CCAB roundtables. So if you're interested in coming to that content roundtable, to discuss our documentation site, things like that, let us know. We're certainly interested in having more of our customers and partners engage in that. Then we have a couple of technical webinars coming up. One is best practices on using LCAs and DVFs. And then one that I'm really excited about too is data mesh and data fabric. What are they and what are the differences? And then another technical webinar around Reltio name cleansers for matching. And then we have a show coming up on how Google is improving their data quality on October 7th. So Google will be there in addition to Michael, and he's our data quality guy here at Reltio. And then we have some more CCAB meetings coming up. So that's all really that I was going to talk about. Let me stop sharing, and I'm going to let Megan take it away, and I'm just going to go on mute and listen in.
Awesome. Thanks, Detzel. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. Again, I'm Megan Gilhooly, Senior Director of Self-Help and Content Strategy here at Reltio. And I want to welcome you to today's show. Today, we're giving our favorite moderator, Chris Detzel, a break while we discuss a really important topic. And whether you're male or female, whether you're just starting out or you're trying to hire and retain top talent, everyone is impacted by the need for diverse and inclusive teams. I'm going to make the assumption today that we're beyond the point of having to lay out why diversity is important. I think we all understand that. Today, we're going to dive specifically into how to attract and retain women in data. And a lot of the lessons that we learned today will apply much more broadly than that. So with that, I'm very excited to welcome the 3 gals who know a thing or two about this topic. So I'm going to start with Ashley. If you could sort of tell us about yourself and why you decided on a career in data, and then how you found your way to MDM specifically, and then also tag on what your aspirations are in this world.
Yeah, so Ashley Fugelsted, and I apologize, I am on here twice, guys, some fun audio issues, but I've been with Reltio for about 6 years now. Previously, I was an engineer at a bank, so definitely been in the IT side of things, front end side, and I've seen lots of different experiences with different folks here and there. So it's been getting into data was never my initial goal. I will say I used to always want to be a chef, and then I ended up in IT. So it's always for that. But yeah, so that was my original aspirations. And now coming from the back end side, my future aspirations are probably to be more on the front end side and be with people more.
Nice. What does that mean? Be with people more?
I feel like I talk too much to be an engineer. I love to interact with people, anything that can get more on the front end side. I'm in the pre-sale side now. And so just getting in front of customers and prospects more and being able to take that technical side and then just be able to talk to it more and help other folks with it.
Very nice. Awesome. Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Popovits. I'm a technical consultant here at Reltio in the professional services group for the past 6 months. So I'm pretty much brand new here. I'm not new to data. I've been in the data world for about the past 10 years, started with a competing product, and then we had upgraded to Reltio a few years ago, and I fell in love with it so much I joined the company. Yay. Prior to that, I was a programmer for 20 years in client server, a little bit of mainframe at the very beginning, and for another 10 years in Java Enterprise. So it was a natural fit for me to move from being a programmer to data, because it's just more interesting, right? You start with one stage and then you move to the next stage, and data's great. So my aspirations is just to keep getting better. There's just so much technology, so many things you can learn in data, and data tells a story. So my aspirations are just to keep getting better and do what I love.
Very nice. Love it. Thanks, Michelle. Deanne.
So, by the way, great to hear that, Michelle, for sure. I'm Deanne Branham, and I am the VP of Professional Services here at Reltio. And so I have the privilege of having Michelle in my group. And quite honestly, we in professional services have really are striving to make sure that we are hiring women in tech, because it's just something that is really great. And I've been here about 6 years. I've been in this role twice, and I've had lots of different roles within Reltio. So I've got the privilege of having a lot of different perspectives. I got into data itself back in 2003. When I joined the master data management group in a previous company, a large vendor back then. And so it's just been a journey of, the thing about data is if you want a problem to solve, data is a great way to solve that problem. And it also has within itself needs those problems to be solved. And so that is kind of my aspiration is, as Michelle said as well, it's really always to get better, but I always want to see, what is the way to solve the most complex problems, and data was a great entryway into getting that passion started. So that is where we're at today.
Very cool. Okay, thanks, ladies. So we're gonna dive right in. And Ashley, I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag here or what, but just so everyone knows, so Ashley, your mom is Deanne. So how much did having a mother in a technical profession and a data related profession, how much did that sort of model for you the idea that you could be in that?
I mean, like I said before, I wanted to be a chef. So culinary school. And I mean, because of her, she was just like, I know you, I'm going to guide you this way. And so it's a big influence in my whole career and what I'm even here for. And having that example, and just if anyone's got that just leadership that they can just follow on, it's changed my whole life, which is incredible, because I feel like without that guidance, I don't know if I would have gone into tech, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. And so in that regard, Deanne, I'm curious, I'm a mother of 4. What do you do as a parent to sort of entice your kids to come along for a role that might not be their first passion, but you think they'd be good at?
Well, it was really funny because Ashley, she's number one, she's an excellent cook. We were like so excited that she was going to be a chef when she had made, come and told us, I want to be a chef. I was like, yay, somebody's going to cook for us. I'm so excited because I can't cook. But as we got going forward, she started looking at the aspects of what it took to be a chef, and the nights, the weekends, and I'll never forget the day that she came to me because she was trying to make up her mind. She goes, you know what? She goes, I'm going to do what you do. And I thought, wow, that's amazing that she, had that. Number one, she just made that decision. That's what she was going to do. And what it really made me think about is, you think about the legacy that you would have as a parent, regardless if you're a man or a woman. You can say, my grandfather was a farmer, my dad was a farmer, and I'm going to be a farmer too. I think that you still need that type of legacy, even in all career choices, and including women in tech, because if she can see that she has the role model that where she can be successful, and that she sees growth, and also a passion that maybe it's inspiring within herself, to have that, it really humbles me, because I'm like that, wow, this is a person, number one, who is super smart, strong personalities, can do whatever she wants and be hugely successful, and that's what she chose. So
Awesome.
It's really good to have that type of legacy.
Very cool. So kind of to all of you, and Michelle, you can weigh in here too. Is it different generationally? Is there a difference between when Deanne went into data versus when Ashley went into data? Is there a difference for women specifically?
Are you directing that question to Michelle?
Whoever wants. Michelle, you got anything?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily different. I mean, I've been in the business for, programming and data collectively for 30 years. I've always focused on just doing the job. I mean, imagine it is different, but I'm such a geek that I probably didn't notice. I've just so focused on, I love programming. I loved getting into technology. Heck, it didn't start when I went to school. When I was a kid, my parents learned quickly, give me technology toys.
Right.
I was a stereotypical kid in the 80s that was the one that learned to program the VCR. So for me, I was just embedded in it. I wasn't necessarily aware of if there were attitudes about women or not. I probably didn't even notice that most of my colleagues were male. We were all in one. You work hard, you're good at what you do. Everybody respects you,
Nice.
At that level.
Very good.
So, and speaking of, parents and kids in the same field, my son is going to school for programming. He's about halfway through. So I'm going to, I'm doing my best to get the next generation started.
He's taken after mom. That's awesome.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so I want to move on to the next question. I want to get your reaction to something that happened. I was working at a very large company that I'm not going to name, and a male colleague of mine who ran a solutions architecture team asked for a female perspective about a very specific question. He said, I'm having a hard time hiring women who are qualified solution architects. Should I lower the bar in order to meet our target of hiring females? What's your reaction to that? Deanne, I'm going to start with you.
Well, my reaction is that, we all need to be educated on, what diversity really means, and, what it takes to create a diverse culture. I will tell you that there are lots of studies that are done around hiring practices, and it hasn't to do anything with lowering the bar. It's about intentions, that you want to be intentions. It's a known fact, right, that there are more men in technology than women. So then how do you then grow that, female base within the technology area? So number one, it's not about lowering the bar, because there are many, many, many women out there that can, run circles around, being the solution architect and just really excel at it. But the difference is in how you approach that hiring process. So one of the studies actually showed that if you bring 4 candidates to the table, and 1 candidate is a woman and 3 candidates are men, totally qualified exactly the same, the odds of a woman being hired in that role are like less than 1%. If you bring 2 candidates that are women and 2 candidates are men, the odds move up to 50-50. So it's really about knowing that there is a difference, that you have to make intentional choices to be able to achieve the objectives that you want to create a diverse culture.
That's a really interesting statistic, right? To think about, basically, if you bring in fewer women, then people are thinking this is a male role. But if you bring in an even number of men and women, then we take that bias off the table a little bit. That's almost what that sounds like. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
that was an HR, that's an HR statistic that HR actually shared with me. So that's something
Very
from a
cool.
hiring practice that we make sure that we practice here.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that we're bringing more female candidates in, right? We need to find ones that are those sort of rock stars. And Michelle, you were one of those rock stars. You are one of those rock stars, but even when you started, you were very technical, right? So how do people find those candidates to bring them to the table to meet that sort of 50-50 ratio?
For myself, I transitioned from being a programmer. So I wasn't necessarily looking for data in particular, but the company I was with were moving towards data integration. And I saw the writing on the wall. It's one of my superpowers. I see where things are going before other people do. And, I jumped on it and I said, I want to be on this project. I want to do this stuff. I didn't know what it was, but I'd done Java for 10 years. I was ready for a change. You should change every once in a while. You do the same thing, you're going to get bored. Find a new challenge.
Nice. Okay. And Ashley, if you think about yourself as one of those rock stars too, I mean, you wanted to be a chef, right? And your mom got you here. If that path hadn't opened up, what kinds of paths do you think women like you would take to get into data or even tech in general?
I mean, personally, I feel like unless you have a connection or unless you've got some sort of background in it, I think it's hard to even think that this exists. Like, I feel like there's a lot of job opportunities and a lot of different, like even sub careers within IT, within MDM that exist that are not really advertised outside of the IT world. Like if I wasn't an engineer, if I didn't have Deanne here, I don't know if I would have ever known master data management or to look for those types of jobs. And I think that's big, and even trying to get out of those segments and try to get into, wider advertisements to reach the people who might just be getting into IT.
Nice. So I think if I was to translate that to people here who are thinking, well, how do I find those people, right? I think I would translate it into maybe go to the schools, start to do some networking within the schools, maybe become a part of the education of these kids who are coming in that are going into technical fields, or even taking a little step into tech fields to see if they like it, so that you have more women there. Maybe send your Ashleys and Michelles of the world into the school, right? To meet some of these young ladies that are coming up that are thinking, well, I don't know if I should go into tech or data. It's not really a woman's world, but then they see, Ashley and Michelle walk in and they're super cool. Then all of a sudden that could change their mind. So that's how I would kind of translate that. Deanne, go ahead.
Well, I was going to also make another comment. The other aspect of that is in the way that we, just as women, approach looking for jobs and looking for positions, because a lot of time, and this is also another study, and obviously, having to hire people and build a team, I really want to be educated on how to do that in the best way. And so one of the other studies that I read was that when a man will look at a job description, and if they see that they do 80% of that job, then they'll apply. They're not afraid. But when a woman will look at that, and if they don't do 100% of that, they most likely will not apply for that. And I think that just speaks to the differences of how we think about, how we can control our own success and what we're willing to do from a risk-taking perspective. And so it's just something that, we need to think about as women is that if this is a job that that you can do, and if you can do 80 and learn the other 20, you need to go for it, especially if you feel like that this is your passion. That's one of the things that I look for when I'm hiring any member of my team. I want to see that passion, because even if they don't fit the role 100%, that passion will allow them to overcome that 20%.
Absolutely. Great point. And so that makes me think, who thought he was lowering the bar, right? If you're bringing in a female candidate who actually now has 100% plus of the qualifications, and you're pitting them against men who have 80%, you're actually raising the bar by hiring a woman, right? So we need to kind of change our mental model on that. That's interesting. All right. Very good. Ashley, do you have anything to add there before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay, very nice. All right, so what would you tell women specifically who are thinking about a career in data that might be hesitant due to this sort of stereotype that it's a man's world? And would that be the same as, say, somebody who's thinking about tech in general, which also is stereotypically male? So let's start with Michelle.
As I said earlier, is it really a man's world? I mean, I didn't notice. I mean, I've just loved it from the get-go. I mean, does it matter? Does it matter whether we're men or women in this field? I mean, everyone is unique in their style and personality, and gender is just another aspect of a person. So I just enjoy working with other, great techie people. I love geeks, and I say that with great affection.
Geeks can be girls, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Deanne.
Well, I was going to say statistically, and I think it's great that Michelle doesn't, view that, because what it tells, we should tell everybody is that, it's really about she is focused on our passion. She is focused on getting what she needs to do and excelling for herself, which I think is amazing. But statistically, it actually is. If you look at the gender disparity between, just in tech, and then it even gets worse, that disparity gets worse whenever you look at data itself. And so I think that, from how do you attract and how do you, as a person, how would you think about going into data? Number one, I think the best thing that we can all do is make sure that it's your passion, that you want to do that. And to make sure that, that you have that passion for data to be able to exceed in it. But the other thing is it's really about exploring those different opportunities. Sometimes it's just about, tech and data. It's not that different because you have to have tech in order to manage that data. And so sometimes people just fall into it and some people actually pursue it.
Nice. Very good. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Ashley, you agree?
I do. I mean, I would also say that there's probably more of a difference in, people may think it's a man's world, but I don't think that that's probably the majority of the mindset of why women don't get into technology. I would probably say, for at least my generation, knowing like our friend groups and all of those connections, I think it's more of a lack of knowledge and how many different roles that actually exist within technology. I feel like most people just assume that, if you're in tech, you're a programmer, that's what you do all day. But there's such a diverse set of roles that I don't know has been like properly educated or it being advertised or however you want to say it to those different groups and women that, might be interested in doing a role like that.
So that's interesting because it sort of makes the assumption that men are getting info on all those roles. Or are you saying that men just kind of dive in and don't really care what all the roles are, and then they take one? Or like how does that work with
more if we think about like the connections of like how people get into certain roles, usually have somebody that's inspired you or done this. I feel like there's probably more with that with male versus women, just because just from what I've been seeing. I mean, even most of my friends assume that I'm in tech, I'm a programmer, I look at code all day long. And that's probably not as enticing to someone who's a little bit more social or to females or who maybe just want a different role. But in reality, there's tons of different roles in IT and tech and data that I don't think that everyone realizes, especially women.
That's a great point.
It is a great point. It is a great point. When you think about all the meetings on the golf course that include your son but not your daughter, right? And that does happen. I've got 3 boys and a girl. I know this stuff happens, right? So that could be where they're getting the influence of what kind of jobs are there. So that's not the only one, but that's just an example.
Well, just the networking aspect, aspect that you are talking about, there's a far less, I think that there are far less networking groups that are just women than they are just in general. And that was actually one of the comments that brought out at the Women in Tech conference that I went to a couple of weeks ago was we need to be more intentional about doing those type of things as we continue to to grow in numbers in this field.
Absolutely. Michelle, did you have something to add?
Deanne took the words right out of my mouth. She said the
tends to do
networking
that.
aspect. I was just starting to say that. She said those exact words. Now the rest of it was all on her, but
She's a mind reader.
yeah, it does make sense. It is the networking aspect. I mean, if you're out talking to people and they're saying, "Oh, there's this going on and there's that going on," and oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, I should look for that. Maybe men would be more focused on that. Maybe if they're more career focused. Women, we multitask. We do a million different things. We were, dealing with our kids, our parents, our, other aspects, right?
Yeah.
Where we have to load balance potentially a lot more. And maybe we're just not that focused on those things. We realize we have 5 things that are super important in our life, whereas maybe a guy has 2 things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when we think about networking specifically, women have a lot of women-only networking events. Are we hurting ourselves by having women-only networking events? Should we actually be doing co-ed networking events so that we're broadening our horizons, or are we supporting each other in a very powerful way? What do you think?
I think you need both. I think that you need to be intentional about both, because of the fact that, you think about it, you're trying to grow from a diversity standpoint, and any diversity, diverse, culture or race, gender, or whatever. You're trying to grow in that area and then grow the participation in that area. So having that support from a woman's standpoint, and then branching out into the networking, which will give you the ability to have that to more visibility into that area. So you need the support group, but you also need the visibility at the same time. So I think and once you get the visibility and you get the crowdsource or the majority or close to the majority of the participation in the both the men and women networking groups, then you'll see that you'll have less need for support, because then your support moves over into the broader group. So I think that you need both when you're growing into that.
That's a good point. And when you get that network going, then reach back out to the other women who are just starting to help
bring them along.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Very good. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Ashley, I'm coming to you. So we've all kind of heard about these assumptions about how we define women differently than men. We've sort of said some of them today. Sometimes they're bad things, right? We don't negotiate well, or we lack confidence, or we're risk adverse, or we take ourselves out of the game because we value family more than careers. Like these are things that really pull us away. Other times I've heard people differentiate women as sort of more caring, more cooperative, more organized, or my pet peeve, we're better note takers, right? I suck at taking notes, so that's why it's my pet peeve. But so there are these ways that we sort of differentiate ourselves, and I would say men and women both differentiate us in this way. So do these things differentiate men and women in a productive way, or are these things that need to be sort of fixed or accommodated? Ashley.
I think there are definitely assumptions, and I definitely think that there are different gender roles, what people do, and I'll be very blunt. I definitely think there are types of stereotypes that are usually true. From what I've seen in my career, I feel that women are usually more neutral than men when it comes to work environments and tasks, and I've loved who I've worked with, but I feel like if there's any kind of mishap or if there's any kind of egos, I usually see that in men more than I see it in women. And so I think they exist, and I think they're different with everybody's experiences because personalities are all over the board. But I would say that we thrive in things becoming neutral and getting tasks done and multitasking, whereas the stereotypes would say otherwise.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. Deanne, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that's a great perspective, and it made me start to thinking that as you bring more diversity, I think that those stereotypes tend to disappear because you do get the different perspective. And I also think that, we do need to acknowledge that we are different, right? But I think by bringing in those different perspectives, we can hope to achieve the same outcome, even though we might get there a different way. And I think that that's important, because sometimes it's in that different way where we find efficiencies, where we find more productivity. And so we have to be able to appreciate the differences, basically.
Totally agree. I actually have a bit of an example. I don't know how many people have seen Defending the Caveman. It's a comedy, kind of it's a play / soliloquy. It's like one guy that stands up and does this whole thing, and I can't even remember his name anymore, but fabulous thing. And it really, I think, saved my marriage, but also really helped me understand what it means to be a female in the workplace with a bunch of men. So he has this story where he was, well, first of all, we had a dog at the time that was throwing up randomly in the middle of the night. And so the dog would throw up, and I would immediately bounce out of bed. And then the whole time I'd be stewing, like, why is my husband not helping me? Right? Like, I was just angry every time. So I went and saw Defending the Caveman, and this guy talked about how if a bunch of women are sitting around a table playing cards or whatever, and the bowl of chips goes empty, one woman will say, I'll go refill the chips. Another will say, I'll fill the wine glasses. And another will say, I'll make sure we have enough napkins. And, we all kind of collaborate. We come together and go and get it done. But if you put a bunch of men around a table and the bowl of chips goes empty, one man will say, the bowl of chips is empty. The next one will say, well, I bought the chips. And then the next one will say, well, it's my bowl. And they all sort of negotiate on who's sort of the loser that has to go get the chips, right? And so, if you put a co-ed group around the table and a guy goes, well, I bought the chips, the women are all thinking, a-hole, right? So that was a big indication to me that, I have to think about how, in my situation, my husband was, every time I got up to go clean up after my dog, I had lost the negotiation, right? And so that was a big learning in my marriage. But I think I brought that into work, where I realized that there's a difference in the way that men, and maybe just people in general, will behave around negotiation. And that was a big sort of a life changer for me to have that story.
I think that's a great story. I think it's very true to that we were actually talking about being intentional and understanding that there are differences, and appreciating those differences. And I think the same goes for like in conversations as well. If we're all around the conversation, how many of us have been in a room where you're the only female in that room, and there's 5 men and they're all having a conversation, right?
Right.
I don't know if you've read the book Lean In, but you most definitely have to lean in those situations to be seen and to be heard. And it's not an intentional thing. It's a difference thing. And meaning that, if you're not going to participate, then you're not there. So get in, lean into that conversation and be intentional of participation and having yourself be heard.
Nice. Love that. And I think some of it sort of explains this idea of we often think men play the game better than women. And I think that's the game, right? I think the game is the negotiation. Anyway, so how do all of these things play out in your worlds and data? So do you have any specific examples of some of the things we've talked about in data or in tech, or just sort of in general? Do you have specific examples of times where you've leaned in based on being in a room with 5 men, or, anything like that? Deanne?
Well, I can let Ashley or Michelle go first, but I've had that experience even, recently, where I was in a conversation, there were all men around, I was the only woman, and the men actually leaned over to look at the other man in order to have a discussion. And I was in between them. And that, it was probably nobody else would have even known that, because it was just a broad question that they were asking, right? And that person was probably not even doing it intentionally. And so I had to make the decision. This was my area of expertise. I get it that, that they're comfortable talking with each other because they know each other. but I spoke up and I had to speak up. And then all of a sudden I had the intention of the room. What I was saying was important. We actually agreed to do what I had suggested. But if I wouldn't have noticed that and spoken up in the most professional manner, then we might not have come to the conclusion that we needed to quick enough. So there, know that you add value, have confidence in the value that you have, and be aware of your surroundings and behaviors so that you can ensure that you bring in your perspective because it's most likely going to be very successful.
I love a couple things about that. One, that you noticed and you were intentional, but the second is that you really made it clear that you did it professionally, because the one thing you don't want to do, obviously, as the only female in the room, is to just start nagging or yelling at people, right? So the fact that you did it in a very professional way, I think that's an important part of the story. That's a great story, though.
Well, and just to add, I'll just end with this. Again, I don't think people do these things intentionally. It's a behavior that we have because we are different. And that's why you have to notice it. But more importantly, that's why when you are having that interaction, it's with kindness and compassion. Because that's, there's no reason for it to be any other way.
Yeah. And I think it's important for those of you here who are here because you're trying to retain great women on your team. Be the person that notices when this stuff happens, because it happens, right? Like, every woman on this call is probably going, oh yeah, I had that time where I said something and then a guy said the same thing and everyone went, yeah, that's right, Bob. Right? I mean, this stuff happens. It's real. Notice when it happens, and then, just call it out for whoever it is. And it doesn't even have to be for a woman. It could be for the quiet person in the room, right? Just be very intentional about how everybody's behaving, and then react in a positive way when you see something that maybe didn't sit well with someone. Interesting. Michelle, did you have?
It's very true. Sometimes we don't necessarily speak out, or are not as assertive. And I've had situations like that where I felt like colleagues may have, they were more assertive and they just kind of, plowed through, and sometimes I didn't know what to say. And in those situations, I'd gone back, talked to my manager, said, I feel like my ideas, should have merit in and of themselves. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to lower myself to somebody else's behavior just to make myself heard. And I got a tremendous amount of support from that manager. And when in meetings, when I started to make my point about something, that manager came to my defense and made sure that the other folks in the room actually listened, because he recognized what I was saying. So gather support. We're not always going to be, the most assertive people in the room, and we don't necessarily have to be. We don't necessarily have to move ourselves to the level of another person. We have to be the best person we are. Make sure we make our points, and have the support.
Absolutely. Well said. Love that. Very cool. All right. I want to move on to the next topic. This is a big one for me. So let's talk about women apologizing too much. Okay. So I say too much, and I should put air quotes. So I was on a call once with only women, and somebody joined late and apologized for their tardiness. And then another woman called her out and said, don't apologize. We apologize too much. We need to stop apologizing. Now, I kind of look at it, if I'm late for a meeting and I really am sorry, I think it's like, I find it to be polite to say, hey, sorry, I'm late. I don't find it to be a big deal. I also understand the flip side, where if we're apologizing for things that are out of our control, or apologizing for things that maybe someone else did, or whatever, that maybe we're seen as weak, right? And so where do you guys sit on this sort of spectrum of, like, apologizing too much makes us weak versus, we should never apologize?
Well, I won't apologize for having good manners.
There you go.
I don't consider, saying please and thank you as being weak. It's, like I said, it's good manners. If it feels right, I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
And somebody comes to tell me, don't apologize. It's like, who are you to tell me not to apologize? Right? I mean,
Right.
we're grown-ups here. We
Yeah.
communicate with balance and, compassion for the people we're around.
Nice. Well said. Ashley, what do you think? You agree?
Agree with that. I think that, apologizing is part of inner manners. You never think twice about saying, I love that. You never think twice about saying please and thank you. So if you feel that you have caused somebody else an inconvenience, then apologize. Like, I think that's a very weird stereotype.
Right.
Well, let me add something to that, because I do agree that you should always have the best etiquette and manners and be considerate within your conversations. But I've actually been in conversations where somebody apologized for what they said. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way, or sorry this. And I think that when you are speaking in authority and you are trying to get a point across, it's not necessarily that you apologize for having to reword your sentence, as an example, or apologize for having an idea that may be different than somebody else's. And I think that that's probably really what that person was meaning when they were saying we apologize too much, because we do tend to do that. I've been in conversations where I've actually done that. But you wouldn't not see necessarily, a man being apologized because they had to reword their sentence. So we tend to be a little bit more sensitive to, I feel like, and some people look, and let's make one thing clear. We're not talking about every single person and we're putting everybody in a bucket. We've all had different experiences and we all are, have different behaviors. But there, from a general aspect, we do tend to apologize for things that a man would not necessarily apologize for, like the two situations that I had. I think that the biggest advice anybody ever gave me on that was, look, just own it. Own it. Do what you need to do to say what, and to come across with the fact that if this is something that you strongly believe in, let everybody know that this is, you strongly believe in it. It's okay to be passionate. You don't have to apologize for that. You don't have to apologize for rewording your sentence. Just do it, own it, and then make your point.
Absolutely agree with that.
Hear, hear. That sounds great. I love it. So the apologizing should be very authentic. When you really mean to say I'm sorry because you're actually sorry. But when it's just a phrase that we use you're probably not really going to say, I'm sorry, I worded that incorrectly, if you're not really sorry, right? So if it's inauthentic, leave it out. Good. Okay. So what's one thing that a hiring manager in the data field can do or change today to recruit more women or keep more of the women they have? I'm going to start with Deanne.
So this has really been a great session, because one of the things that Ashley had said was maybe we don't know about, certain roles and that are out there. So I'm actually going to widen where I look now for specific roles, because one of the things that we have to do is to be intentional. We have to understand that there are differences, and that, in a way that a woman might apply for a role or even look for a role, and then just go after those areas that you need to address in order to increase your diversity within your group. I probably have one of the least diverse groups in Reltio today, and I'm trying to very desperately change that because it's such a valuable experience to have different perspectives to achieve the same outcome, but know that you can get there in many different ways. And it really enriches the group and makes your knowledge even deeper. And so the best thing that you can do is to be intentional about where you're looking, what you're looking for, and to encourage those that you want to have seek out the roles that you have.
Very nice. Love it. Ashley?
I would agree with that. Just if they're looking to expand who they can hire on, especially for the women, I would say widen your net. Like I said before, within, my particular age group and our friend groups that we know, the amount of people that just don't know the different jobs that are available in MDM, in data, and technology, I think there's this general assumption that, if you're in IT, you code for 9 hours a day. That's it. And there's just a ton of other opportunities that I feel like only get marketed to IT and to people in the industry, that we kind of just recycle everybody from companies here and there. And that's great. I love that we do that. But I think there's a whole different group of people that we're not marketing to that would probably thrive in this industry that just don't know about it.
Good point. Very good. Michelle?
And you may have programmers in your company in a different area, you know, women, of course, and they may not even realize that data is something they could get involved in, that their skills would transition very nicely into that world, because a lot of the same concepts apply. And there is some element of programming in data as well. So approach them, you know, let them know that, we're out there looking for you, right? We're looking for people like you.
Nice. Love it. Okay, so we're going to move into some questions. So please put your questions in the chat and I'll get to them. We're going to start with one that Terry Turner put up. Terry, you're on camera. Do you want to just come off mute and explain your question?
Hi guys, thank you for unmuting me, and it's been a really awesome session. My comment was based on what sometimes when females speak up and kind of lean in and give their opinion, it sometimes can be construed as being either over emotional or sensitive, and those kinds. And so I'm curious, have you ever experienced that, and how do you respond to that?
It's a great question. What do you guys think? Ashley?
I actually feel like I've had the opposite experience, and maybe that's just with my career, but I feel like that I've worked with very passionate men, and they tend to come off as more either emotional or aggressive, and then they would pull us in to be the neutral party. And so I've just had opposite experiences that I've had.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we're tend to be looked at as the more neutral parties to come in and fix the situation.
Yeah, less hot-headed, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What's your experience?
I think that, I am a very passionate person. I love what I do. And, if there is something that I feel strongly about, I mean, I don't know if they come up as over emotional as much as maybe too passionate. But I've been in the same situation where, somebody's getting, hard or driven by something, and that's a male, that they have, they will actually say, I'm just so passionate about this. So I have, and I think probably it has been misunderstood as maybe I'm just getting emotional or angry or coming across as, harsh. And that's something that I have to work on then, if that's the case, because you want to be passionate, but with anything, you don't want to go over the line. And this is for a man or for a woman. But at the same time, understand where your own level is and what you're comfortable is in communicating, and understand how you're coming across to people. I think that regardless if this is about being over emotional or under emotional, it's really about being able to understand how you're coming across to that other person and how you're communicating, and to ensure that, you should be able to read that and be able to pull it in or push it out.
Yeah, really well said. Michelle, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Ashley was saying. I often would see, the males, being more, like, I guess, emotional about things, especially you get two or more of them in a room. And if they're very passionate and disagreeing, they can get pretty loud, and maybe it does take a woman, because we're more collaborative. We like to build consensus, help them come down. So yeah, we may be emotional, but I think, we're responsible enough that we use it judiciously, in the right way.
Yeah. I think the judiciously word is kind of the key there. And it goes back to a little bit what you were saying, Deanne. One of the best strategies I've learned for handling any kind of conflict is to make sure that when the one thing you don't want to ever say is, I don't care, right? You don't want to give the impression that you don't care, right? So you can't just be like, this is a stupid discussion, I don't care, right? So you could use the phrase, you could, use the phrase, my needs are low. You can say my needs are low, right? My needs are low on this, go ahead. And if you do that one time, then when you do actually have some passion for whatever the outcome is, then you can step in and be like, no, I feel very strongly, right? But they're used to hearing my needs are low or I feel very strongly. And that way you can sort of take the emotion out of it, but you can say, you can make it very clear that either you're really going to push for this because you really believe in it, or it's like, yeah, we can go your way and, you know, gain some social capital by not always being the one having the best idea, right? So that's one way that I've seen it happen.
That's a great advice. I'll even take that advice.
Oh, it's awesome. It actually comes from, well, there's a conflict management system where the idea is about looking at where your needs are and defining whether you're going to compete or you're going to acquiesce or you're going to, you know, all these different strategies based on your needs and based on the needs of the other individual. So it's really interesting. That's for another session though. All right. So Mel has a question. Deanne alluded to the fact that we can apply the principles we're discussing for women equally to other groups in the same way that we can lowering the bar. How can we encourage / support diverse candidates / employees of minority races, gender identities, etc.? Can any of you share specific examples in your experience? And there's Mel. Thanks for joining. Do you have anything to add to that question, Mel?
Only that you can't answer the question, Megan, because I know your experience. You hired me.
I can still answer.
That was the right candidate. But
Find rock stars. That's the answer. All right, Deanne, what do you think, Deanne?
But I mean, I do believe that. I believe the same principles can apply where you have to go and intentionally find those people that are qualified, that are diverse, whether they be different, you know, races or genders, identities or whatever. And then you bring them to the table in the same ratio that you bring anybody else. Because if that, I think that the same thing applies for a race as an example. You know, you need to have that same number of candidates to be equally evaluated. Otherwise, I think it falls into the same ratios that you had before. You bring 3 and 1, you have very low success in getting that person onboarded. You bring 2 and 2 or 4 and 4, then you have a much higher things. And here's what it really comes down to, right? We have to understand that there are going to be differences even in the number of people that are interested in the role. And you will have to look a little bit harder for women, for different races, but you need to build that diversity. So be intentional, take the time that it requires to build your team into that diversity by looking and taking the time to look for those candidates.
Very nice. Do you have anything to add to that, Mel, while you're on?
I think the only thing I would say is, you know, to the earlier point, well, there are no qualified candidates. That actually means I don't know where to look for qualified candidates.
That's right.
And so employers need to broaden their net beyond their traditional recruitment channels, because that's where they're finding who they already have. And so look for the special interest groups, look for the women in technology groups, seek out the technology chapters at the historically Black colleges and universities. You know, there are plenty of professional organizations that are geared for women, geared for people of different races or identities or whatever. So they're there. Employers just need to look a little harder.
Agreed.
So Mel will be the star of our next talk. Thanks for coming on, Mel. Appreciate that. So I did want to mention Chris Eiloff. You had a great question before, and I did bring it up, but did we answer your question?
Yeah, it was some great examples of it. So again, those real world examples aren't always things that people are, you know, aware of in the moment, right? So it's really good to hear that and understand how it makes people feel. Right?
Yeah. I think it's important to talk over Chris while he's talking, just so he understands the experience.
Please do. Please do.
All right, very good. Okay, any last questions before we wrap up? I don't see any other. Oh, No. Not seeing any others.
This is Vivian Wu. I have a question. I think that at the hiring stage, it's almost too late because the women's or girls have already decided their career path. So I wonder, as the industry, what do you do to encourage girls going to the technology track? I'm using my daughter as an experience. As an example, she was in high school and going to the computer science AP, there are very few girls left, and it was lonely. And so of course we encourage her to stay on track, and she now chose her career as a computer software engineer. And she also went to a conference that I think was at Deanne mentioned that you were in Orlando.
Yeah, well, mine was in Menlo Park, but I think they have different sites.
Oh yeah, okay. So like the school, the university sponsored her and other girls going to that, and then she also is involved in the club in computer science. But every year she has to solicit funds from different companies to sponsor for the activities. So I wonder what the industry is doing to encourage women into the technology track. I mean, you're talking about recruitment. If they don't have the basic skill or not even educated that way, it's too late. So what do you do as an industry to encourage girls?
I'd love to jump in on this one.
Go for it, Ashley.
We actually had a couple of females in IT, and they had this great program that we would go to high schools and talk to girls and get them into coding classes, and then kind of be that mentor, through high school once they got into college. So I think it goes back to having that relationship and having somebody that does kind of guide you and support you in that. But I mean, historically, just having the ability to go and start at the high school level, and even the, younger than high school, junior high, and talking to those girls and encouraging to get that. I think it was really important for them to see somebody that was actually in that field. And obviously, any family members always help. But for those that don't have that, having that hands-on experience and that relationships through those years in high school, I think would help if more companies did that. Because I don't think there is like an industry-wide solution. I think it's a solution for everyone to go out and do that.
But somebody also put something on the chat here that's really the Grace Hopper Conference in Orlando has a tech conference, and they recruit interns from that. So I think that what we're talking, what I'm talking about obviously is from an individual, my team perspective. But Vivian, you make a really great point. As a company, our HR team, if they're not already aware, I will tell you that our HR team I feel like is very progressive in this area, because they're the ones that bring all these statistics to me. That we need to be able to take that into the same aspect of recruiting and looking for those programs, or creating those programs if we don't already have them. So really, to answer the question, is both. We need to encourage the companies that we work for to be able to have these type of programs, so they're going to encourage that growth early on in a young woman's life, whether it be in high school or in college, to be in tech. And at the same time, individually, we can look for ways to be of service to these young ladies in that same age group of, like I said, high school or college, and whether that be a mentorship program that you take upon yourself, or starting something, or bringing that to the attention of the company. It just takes one person to take action to have a result.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. This has been an incredible discussion. I just thank you guys so much, Deanne, Ashley, Michelle. So good to hear your perspectives. Thank you for that. Thanks to everyone else who sort of chimed in. Hopefully everyone found some insight here. If there's additional questions, please feel free to reach out to either Chris Detzel and he can get us involved, or you can reach out to me directly, megan.gilhooly@reltio.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear what you thought of today's group. We also are hoping that maybe we can do this more often. So if you have ideas for the next time we do this, please let me know and we'll get to it. Thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Megan. Thanks,
Bye.
Ashley. Thanks, Dan.
Great job. Wow, that was really amazing. Yes, this is going to be recorded and posted to community.reltio.com. My hope is by Monday, and I'll send out an email to everyone for the link. And yes, we will do this again for sure. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Detzel.
Bye-bye.